Hello and welcome back. I'm delighted to be joined by two incredible advocates and change makers from the New York Saves demonstration. They're working to make the systems that families rely on safer and more responsive to survivors of domestic violence. I'm joined here by Allison and Sara. How are y'all today?
Hi, Candace. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm so excited. I'm personally excited because I get to I personally work with you both and know your excellence and know the amazing things that you're doing in New York. So I'm so excited to be able to just share on this broadcast. I know y'all, but I want everybody else to know y'all. So no formal introduction for me, but can you share with everyone your names, your titles, and what you're doing on the Saves Project in New York?
My name is Allison Bernard. I'm a child support specialist with the Division of Child Support Services with the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance in New York State.
And I'm Sara Hirsch. I'm the project manager of the Saves demonstration site in New York, and I work for the New York State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence, which is the country's only cabinet-level agency dedicated to the issue of gender-based violence. And the Saves grant is a collaborative project between our two agencies.
Nice. So what motivated this project? I mean, it's urgent, it's needed, and it's something that I think, people have all decided that we need to do this right now. So can you tell me more about what motivated this project in New York and why did you all choose to become a part of the demonstration teams?
Sure. Survivors really accessing child support services can face barriers, re-traumatization, even physical harm. So we took a look at the Family Violence Indicator in our automated child support system, which really indicates the presence or history of domestic violence for anyone in the child support program. So what we learned when we looked at that was that our indicator was only 3.39% in 2023, when, however, 30% of New Yorkers experienced domestic violence in their lifetime, studies have shown. So it really indicated us that survivors really are not disclosing that they have a safety concern, or they're just not applying for child support services so they can stay safe.
Wow, 30%. That's a lot of people. And how does this align with the broader mission of the Saves Project, which is, of course, a national initiative? How is the work in New York aligning to that?
Yeah, so I actually want to tie that into the question previously and add to a little bit of what Allison said. I mean, we're really lucky that Governor Hochul and her administration have directed agencies to transform systems to be more survivor-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive. So in our collaborative work with OTDA, we took a look at that data, which showed that we know how many people are experiencing domestic violence, and clearly we're not able to capture that in the existing screening. So one of the main missions of the Saves Project is to make sure that survivors were able to safely access child support. So looking in that data and seeing the main mission of the Saves grant, we decided that it was time to move forward and figure out how we can transform the system to be safer for survivors.
Awesome. And that's what people love to see, right? The government looking at something saying, okay, we see an issue, right? How do we mobilize this? How do we make something happen? So that's exactly what we like to see the government do, like respond to what they see are challenges in our community. And so tell me about your response. What are you all doing? Who is it impacting? How is it working?
Yeah, so the grant can really be broken down into two components. The first part is understanding the system. So we are looking at the child support system and related systems like public assistance and family court, because some folks do go to family court for child support. So we wanted to make sure that we could fully understand the system, because you have to understand something before you change it. So the first component is understanding the system. So we did systems mapping. We had lots of conversations with stakeholders. I know we'll talk more about this later, but we had impact expert advisory groups where we had survivors come and talk about their experience accessing child support. And then once we were able to understand the system and fully see the big picture and how survivors were being impacted, we were able to put an action plan in place to implement changes to make things safer and more accessible. And one of the things that we are working on right now is implementing a new screening form, a new comprehensive screening form. And I'll let Allison talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Sara. We have introduced a new family safety screening form in June of 2025, statewide implementation of a 7-question screening form, which has questions that are operational and behavioral. Operational being what could be a trigger in the child support process that may trigger survivors. behavioral, really relates to domestic violence, what it looks like on the abuser side, and how we can recognize that. And really the intent is to give survivors and all of our customers an opportunity to talk to child support staff privately about the safety options that are available that the program can offer. That's really what our mission is. And also offer referrals directly to domestic violence service providers immediately once we learn that there is a safety concern. So really, it's an overhaul of our entire screening system in the child support program.
Wow. It sounds like that was an immense ongoing. As I was privileged to hear more about that and working with you all about all of the lifts and loads that took to get you where you were. I would love to hear more about the survivor-based advisory panel and how the voices of survivors have helped to create and develop this tool.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So as I said, our goal is to transform systems to be survivor-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive. So the survivor voice really leads all of the work that we do at our agency, in our collaborative grant, and at New York State. So we heard from survivors in a few ways. We have an advisory council with members of government leaders, nonprofit leaders, and survivors that meets regularly so that we can get the experience of all sectors and different systems when doing this work and making these changes. But we also specifically had impact expert advisory groups where we asked survivors to come together and just share their stories, tell their experiences. We really appreciate the work of the local domestic and sexual violence service providers who we worked with to recruit survivors. But we really just wanted to give survivors an opportunity to tell us their story and their experience working within these systems, trying to get child support and the help they need so that we could identify what gaps and barriers existed, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't just creating a system that worked for us, but worked for the people who were going to be using it.
Right. That is amazing. And so what I'm hearing too is a lot of research, a lot of evidence-based practices, a lot of digging into not just what the community needs, what the system needs, how to operationalize that. So how has that research and evidence from SAVES played in guiding this kind of process that you all have done?
Yeah. You want me to talk about?
Sure.
Yeah. So before we implemented the new screening tool statewide, we did a pilot program in 12 counties. These are 12 child support districts who signed on to be our guinea pigs and work with us as we try to implement changes in the child support system. And when we decided we were going to do a new screening tool, we started by giving 2 different question sets, 2 different screening tools, which I think Allison alluded to earlier, and having half of the pilot districts use one and half use the other. We collected data and used the questions that survivors identified with the most to create the new combined screening form that we're now using statewide. Because like Allison said earlier, the FBI data is just one safety question that asks if people feel safe. And the response was low. It's less than 5%. What was it? 3.9?
3.39.
3.39 people said yes, they felt unsafe. So this new, more comprehensive screening tool, which was created with survivor input, was tested at the pilot districts. We found that 40% of people using this tool screened in as survivors and were able to access resources. So to go from 3.9 to 40, obviously the data is not apples to apples, but it was a really enlightening what can happen when you screen survivors in a way that works for them.
Absolutely. Survivor-centered. I think that's been the theme, right, that I've been seeing in all the conversations that I've had today about doing work that's survivor-centered, that's people-centered, that's human-centered, however you want to name it. It's putting the human beings at the center of the work that we're doing, but also using those stories to then operationalize the work that we're doing. So that's so great to hear.
Exactly.
So I know that you all are, in the thick of this. It sounds like you just released this in July, which congratulations. I know the feat that took to get that on board, getting all the right parties to the table, all the right yeses, all the right, documents signed off to move there. But what does success look like in the short term and the long term for you all in this implementation of this new tool?
So I think really one of the goals for the New York State SAVES demonstration is to increase the understanding of the safety options that we have available. for people who are applying or accessing our services. So we also introduced an informational flyer, and we also have a Get Child Support Safely poster and brochure that we're making sure are being distributed to domestic violence service providers and other organizations. So I think getting the word out to our partners that normally would not promote child support in their system, I think that's part of our big picture moving forward.
Yeah. And to add to that, genuinely everyone cares about domestic violence, but it's not in a lot of people's purview, especially frontline staff who are working hard and at capacity, doing what they need to be doing. And now they're being told, okay, we want you to hone in on survivors and domestic violence and do things a little differently. So I think another short-term goal is to really shift the culture in the way that systems look at domestic violence, work with survivors from both the top down and the bottom up. A lot of buy-in comes from leadership directive, but we also really want frontline staff and people who are working with the public to shift their mindset about how this is a part of their work. This is a part of all of our work.
Oh, absolutely. And that was going to be my next question. What's the buy-in strategy? Like, how are you getting so many? I know New York has one of the largest amount of case managers that work in child support and family court systems. So how are you? What's the strategy? What is the secret sauce?
Yeah. Lots of secret sauces.
That's all Sara.
Right.
We were really intentional. Well, we were intentional with everything that we were doing, but when it comes to stakeholder engagement and buy-in strategy, we used a lot of change management theory. We wanted to make sure that we were implementing these changes in a way that worked for the people who were going to be implementing them and in a way that was sustainable. So some of the strategies were a little more obvious, right? Leadership buy-in, because directives that come from leadership are more likely to be sustained. But we also wanted to make sure to do things like implement opportunities for feedback loops. So this way, frontline workers had an opportunity to say to us, this isn't working. We have this question. Here's where we're running into issues. So we had several events, live events, where we gave people opportunities to talk to us, and we shared more information about where we're coming from and why we're doing what we're doing. We hold regular office hours to make sure that people can come and ask questions. We implemented mandatory training so that people could really understand the intersection of domestic violence and child support. It was really, really thoughtful the way that we decided to roll this out, because we wanted to make sure to do it in a way that worked. And system change is hard, and to sustain it over time is difficult. So we were really intentional about making sure that we had buy-in as we were doing this and beyond.
So absolutely. I would say, like, as being a part of the team that provided feedback to that implementation plan, I would just say that I was like overjoyed to see like a state that was so intentional about the feedback loops, about getting buy-in, about making sure that people were informed. And there was just overall a true spirit of transparency that I saw from both ways that was happening. And so I think, like, absolutely to your point, that is how you increase buy-in and get buy-in from folks from all over.
This grant is such an incredible opportunity to take the time and be really thoughtful about the changes that we're making. I think a lot of people, there's so much to change. There's so much we want to do, and there's so much that we already have to do. So this grant has really given us an incredible opportunity to take the time to slow down and figure out, how do we do this in a way that works? And that's something that's been really amazing to be a part of, is working with a team who wants to take a minute to go, okay, but how is this going to work for survivors? How is this going to work for frontline staff? How does this impact child support coordinators, right? We really, we took the time to think about every person at every level so that we could see success with this rollout.
Thank you. And so that sparked another question to me really quickly. So if another state was going to take on this challenge and say, hey, we want to implement something like this, what advice would you give them? If you would say, like, this is one or two of the greatest learnings that you took from this particular project, what advice would you give another state that's taking on this challenge?
I would say to make sure to have all the right people at the table and give yourself more time than you think you need so that you can do it right the first time.
Yes, I would just add to listen to the survivors and make sure that you're hearing staff as they have objections or negativity towards the change, because it's a huge culture shift. like Sara was saying, and just offering technical assistance as many times as you need to, repeating how we got here, what we've learned. It's going to make it go a lot more smooth.
Absolutely. And I keep hearing the same thing, making sure the right people are at the table, elevating the right voices. That is so powerful. So in closing, I want you both to, in one short sentence, tell me what gives you hope in this project and its potential impact.
I've already seen so much change at the state level and my state partners, from frontline staff. The way people talk about domestic violence and understand things really gives me hope that change is possible because I've already seen it.
Yeah, and I believe it gives me hope to hear the frontline staff tell us their success stories about dealing with survivors, talking to survivors, listening to them, understanding their needs, and meeting them, providing the resources that they need to be financially stable.
So thank you, Sara and Allison. Thank you for sharing your work. I've appreciated learning and knowing so much about what you're doing in the state of New York. It shows innovation in this field about making systems survivor-centered, responsive, and safe. We're looking forward to learning more about what's happening in New York and how this tool continues to change the system in New York.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.